Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Grover Reads the News. I hope some goodness of your weekend ahead is calling to you. I'm wishing you and your neighbors and strangers here and around the globe peace in our lifetimes and in our day-to-day lives. Today is Friday, March 21st, 2025, and I have a news update for you. Would you like to hear it? If so, listen on. If not, I'll offer again soon. Before we start with the news, though, I want to remind you that we're going to feature some very local news in a couple of episodes coming up. Do you have news to share from your community? Hard to hear or joyous, inspiring or worrisome? I want to know what's going on. To submit, email a screenshot, a PDF, or a link that is not behind a paywall about what's going on to groverreadsthenews@substack.com. Let me know if you want me to use your first name or not. And with that, let's hear the news. First, we have U.S. news about education. On Thursday, Trump signed an executive order instructing the U.S. Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, to, quote, take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education, unquote, and to do so to the maximum extent appropriate and permitted by law. Before this executive order, the department had already announced it was shrinking its workforce by nearly half with cuts to all divisions, reports NPR. According to Chalkbeat, the Education Department administers billions of dollars in federal assistance through programs such as Title I, which benefits high-poverty schools, and the Individuals with Disabilities Act, or IDEA, which offsets the cost of special education services for students. This will likely have a massive impact for schools and families who are already fighting for quality education for their children with disabilities and for children in schools that are already struggling amidst post-COVID budget and staffing challenges. The Department of Education also administers financial aid for college students, shares information about best practices in education with states and school districts, and enforces civil rights laws. And it oversees the school accountability system, which identifies persistently low-performing schools that need extra support. Trump's move to dramatically slash the department's staff could impact its capacity and productivity, even if officially its functions remain in place. The administration said that the, quote, funding formula for schools that are protected by law would be preserved, but nearly all the workers who determine which schools should receive this funding will be fired. Funding required by law provides a funding stream for schools with high percentages of students living in poverty and rural schools. This change also increases uncertainty about how federal student loans will be dispersed and administered. Experts warn that the administrative challenges in transferring oversight of student loans from one part of the government to another are significant. Quote, it doesn't pass the sniff test that you'd summarily move a complex, large student debt portfolio from the Department of Education, where it's already lived, and just plop it over to the Treasury, said Jessica Thompson, Senior Vice President at the Institute for College Access and Success, a nonprofit group based on education policy. While the White House hasn't released a plan for overseeing student loans, or specifically which departments would inherit its duties, the plan for student loan administration is unknown. Next, we have U.S. news about Social Security. The Trump administration also announced this week that the Social Security Administration will require millions of Social Security recipients and applicants to visit agency field offices rather than interact with the agency over the phone. Beginning March 31st, people will no longer be able to verify their identity to the Social Security Administration over the phone, and those who cannot properly verify their identity over the agency's My Social Security online service will be required to visit an agency field office in person to complete the verification process. The change will apply to new Social Security applicants and existing recipients who want to change their direct deposit information, reports the Associated Press. 90% of elders in the United States get income from Social Security, and half of people over 65 rely on Social Security for at least half their income. The families of 1.4 million children whose parents died young or the Social Security or are on Social Security disability rely on these funds to lift their family above the poverty line. The plan comes as the agency also announced it will shutter dozens of Social Security offices around the country and lay off thousands of workers. Retiree advocates warn that the change will negatively impact older Americans in rural areas, including those with disabilities, mobility limitations, and those who live too far from Social Security offices and have limited internet access. Next, I have an update on international news about people who were deported from the U.S. without trial and held in a Panamanian jungle detention center. The Associated Press reports that earlier this month, Panama released those remaining migrants from the camp, giving them 1 month to leave Panama. The Panamanian government said they had declined assistance from the international organizations, instead choosing to make their own arrangements. But with limited money, no familiarity with Panama, and little to no Spanish, the migrants have struggled. On Tuesday, about a dozen migrants began visiting foreign missions in Panama's capital, including the Canadian and British embassies and the Swiss and Australian consulates, with the hopes of starting a process to seek refuge in those countries. They were either turned away or told they would need to call or reach out to embassies by email. Messages were sent with no response or a generic response saying the embassies couldn't help. Many of the deportees said they would be open to seeking asylum in Panama, but have been told by international aid groups and Panamanian authorities that it would be difficult, if not impossible, to be granted refuge in the Central American nation. The migrants had traveled halfway across the globe, reaching the U.S. border where they sought asylum and instead found themselves in Panama, a country some had traversed months earlier on their way to the U.S. Deportees, including Omag from Afghanistan, say they worry that foreign governments and aid organizations were washing their hands of them. Omag said that as an atheist and member of an ethnic minority group in Afghanistan known as the Hazara, returning home under the rule of the Taliban would mean death. He only went to the U.S. after trying for years to live in Pakistan, Iran, and other countries, but being denied visas. Russian Alexander Sergin is among the group seeking help at the embassies. He said he left his country because he openly opposed the war in Ukraine on social media and was told by government officials he could either be jailed or fight with Russian troops in Ukraine. When asked Thursday what he would do next, he responded simply, "I don't hope for anything anymore." Alvaro Botero, among those advocating for the migrants at the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, said he wasn't surprised that they were turned away from the embassies, as such help is often only offered in extreme cases of political persecution, and that other governments may fear tensions with the Trump administration if offering asylum. "It's crucial that these people are not forgotten," Botero said. "They never asked to be sent to Panama, and now they're in Panama with no idea what to do, without knowing what their future will be, and unable to return to their countries." The same day, Filippo Grandi, head of the UN Refugee Agency, warned that aid cuts by the U.S. government would hurt refugee services around the world. Quote, "We appeal to member states to honor their commitments to displaced people. Now is the time for solidarity, not retreat," Grandi said in a statement. This report relied heavily on the direct reporting and writings of Janet Skye, who is with the Associated Press, reporting from Mexico City. Finally, we have nature news on iguana travels. For decades, scientists have puzzled over how iguanas, which are native to the Americas, traveled across 1/5 of the Earth's surface, across the Pacific Ocean, and live now on the island of Fiji. Previous theories suggested that an extinct species of iguana rafted from the Americas without a clear timeline, while others proposed that the lizards migrated overland from Asia or Australia, said the lead study author, Dr. Simon Scarpetta, an assistant professor at the University of San Francisco. Findings were published this week in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, showing that the iguanas likely hitched a ride on vegetation across the Pacific Ocean between 34 million and 30 million years ago, settling around the same time as the volcanic formation of the Fijian Islands. To determine when iguanas arrived in Fiji, researchers analyzed the genes of 14 living iguana species. The team found that the closest living relative to the Fijian iguanas is a type of desert iguana native to the southwestern United States and northwestern Mexico. Fossil evidence further supports the idea that these iguanas originated in North America, as no fossils of desert iguanas have been found elsewhere in the world. Iguanas have already demonstrated an ability to survive long-distance ocean travel when 15 green iguanas appeared on the beaches of Anguilla in the Caribbean in 1995 on rafts of uprooted trees after a hurricane. They can stand the heat and the dehydration and eat the plants they're sitting on. They are brave and adaptive travelers, those iguanas. Thanks for joining me to face the news today. I hope the shoots of the first daffodils and skunk cabbages and whatever flower and fauna comes to greet you with the first signs of spring are a blessing to you, with the reminder that this too shall pass, and new growth is possible when we have what we need, even in challenging conditions. The news can be hard to face, but we don't have to do it alone. We can do it together. Until next time, be well.